All right. Sorry that took a second. But it is another day. Let's see. It is January 26th. I can never keep track of the day. Today is a Thursday, and it is a great day. If you want to know why, it is because we're about to send Bitcoin. We're about to manifest 30K. We're going to manifest the God candle, whether it happens today, tomorrow, sometime soon. This is going to kick it off because I don't know if you're familiar with these spaces or not. Anytime I host these, Bitcoin goes up during the space at least. Yesterday I should have kept the space going all day because literally as soon as I ended it, Bitcoin ended up dumping back down. But during the space itself, we saw a nice squeeze. And I think the next time that we get that, it's going to be a solid follow through. Before I go any further, if anybody wants to come up, join the conversation today, hit that request button. I will bring you guys up here in just a little bit and join the conversation. But before we go any further, I want to start off the space with giving a shout out to my partner for today. It's So Rare NBA. For anyone unfamiliar with the platform, they're basically a combination of fantasy sports and NFTs. So I've grown up a huge basketball fan, always have loved fantasy sports. And obviously, being involved with crypto and NFTs, I love collecting. If you're looking to try it out for the first time, their common game is free to play for anyone interested. You can check out an example of one of those lineups for the Common Champion Series that I submitted for this week that I pinned above. You can also sign up there. There are also different tiers of cards with varying rarities in the more advanced leagues. So I'm hyped because AD is finally back, which means I can finally use him for the first time, my limited lineup, since I picked him up in December. With all that said, let's go ahead, jump into the conversation you've all been waiting for, and let's manifest let's manifest some bullish price action. Jack, how are you doing today, sir?
Dude, I am doing great and glad to be here. Glad that we could share this bullishness. Finally, we're on the same side of the trade. It's been too long. This is exciting. The charts are screaming that I think we're going to be looking upward, that the momentum is up, that dips are for buying and rips are not for selling or fading anymore. And that's just a really, really comfortable place to be. And shout out to everybody in the chat. If you've survived the last year of downtrend, there's a really good chance the worst of the bear market is behind you. And we don't know that 100%, right? And who knows what the future holds. But that's the reality. You could have made it through it already. And like, what if the bear market's behind us? The bear market bottom anyway. So I'm excited to be here, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to have you. And for those of you who don't know Jack, make sure you give him a follow. I really respect him, and he also has Twitch streams that he does just about every day where he covers TA, breaks down the market. Great if you're into the TA side of things, and even if you're not into the TA side of things, I think sometimes it's interesting to be able to just dive in, get a little bit of a different perspective, broader view of the market, and yeah. So make sure to give him a follow. Longtime guest of these spaces. So yeah, man, I'm excited that you're finally on the same page as well. I've been waiting for that confluence. Um, you know, as a background, there was a while where Jack and I, the past few months, have been back and forth on bullishness, bearishness, etc. It's been a minute since I've done one of the trading specific spaces and had the chance to have Jack up here. So Jack, just as a background for everybody here, you mind sharing kind of what it was that helped you flip bullish, kind of where that happened? I know it happened a little while ago, but just, context for the situation for how you got to where you are right now.
Yeah, sure thing, man. Okay, so I'm a big cycle believer, and like everything kind of started with that. So when Bitcoin hit its top, and from a charts perspective, this is back around 60K. It became really clear that hey, we've probably topped, and from there it was just a waiting game for over a year. Now, what's really interesting is over the last, call it 200 days. So this is really from like September up to present. The charts showed what's known as a falling wedge, and if anybody's interested, like visually, what it is, it's my pinned tweet right now because it's so important. And that falling wedge has a lot of implications. Many bear markets have ended with falling wedges, not necessarily in Bitcoin, but in other assets. Like it's a thing, and take it seriously. And the bigger and the more time that particular pattern takes to flesh out, the more likely it is to be real and not to be a fake out. So in this instance, it was 220 days of a falling wedge only. So this is aside from the downtrend leading into it, where we just effectively went sideways, and then we broke out. Really, the 1st of January was the start of the uptrend, but it wasn't until like January 10th or 11th or 12th before we actually broke out of the downtrend lines within that falling wedge. So from a TA perspective, that is the time where you flip the light switch from risk off to risk on, at least in my perspective, for Bitcoin specifically, and you hop on board. And what's interesting is a lot of people in the market kind of agreed with that, because across the board things kind of rallied. This is where you had your APT rally and Sol and so on and so forth. This is kind of where everything collectively rallied, because this is really like a canary in the coal mine of risk on, and potentially the bottom of a bear market. Because one last thing, the last two bear market bottoms, one lasted about 120 days back in 2019, and then the one prior to that was like 200 days. And here, like I was saying, this pattern was 220 days. I mean, it's right in line with what we would want to see. 80% downtrend, alts are down 95%, 90 to 95%. So this checked literally every box I'd want to see. And then once it broke out, there you go. That was where my excitement came from.
I love it, man. I'm curious what you think to kind of the comparison right now. So, what I've always followed, what I've talked about in these spaces for the past several months, I mean, realistically, since this summer, right, is comparing this base range that we're in right now to the base range that we were in, the, I guess, fall slash early winter of 2019, fall of 2018, early winter of 2019, that 3 to 4 or 3600 to 4K, 4100 range right there, where it spent 6+ months accumulating in that base range before it ended up having a high time frame breakout of that logarithmic. Don't know what the last thing that you guys heard is. But yeah, if you look at it, clean high time frame breakout, similar to that, out of this base range where I think we've been, incredibly oversold. So I think that there's a potential, if the setup, and it's also at a very similar point of the halvening cycle as well. And like you said, Jack, I'm a huge believer in cycles. And this was the big, green flag that I've been waiting for as far as the moment of, holy shit, like we are about to send.
Yeah, no, agreed. There's a lot of confluence between what we're seeing now and what happened in 2019. I pinned it's really the reply to my pinned tweet, but I put another tweet up in the nest. And what this is assuming things behave like it did in 2019, which is a bit of a coin flip, right? And I admit that. But markets like to rhyme with things they've done in the past. And if it does, we really have two northward targets. Now, these are targets we've had since the breakout, so since 18K or so, and nothing's changed with them. The first target's right about 24,000. The second target's about 33,000. What would make a lot of sense to me is if we go all the way up to the 33 right now, and then for the rest of the year, sell back into the 24 and prove 24 as like a support leading into next year. The halving is next year. Call it December of this year, January next year, where things start to kind of rally off the floor. So it makes a lot of sense to me that maybe we explode up and then we pull back. Worst case scenario here is if we find ourselves back below 18K or so. And nobody even wants to think about that, I know, but you just got to, as far as risk management goes, you just got to have the conversation. If we find ourselves there, then I think everything is topsy-turvy and Vegas odds are for much, much lower. But for now, we can't even trade like that. Like our eyes have to be up.
Okay, I want you to check out the tweet that I just pinned above too. So I put that out earlier. That's a comparison of just the general structure that followed the next few days after that high time frame breakout that I was talking about in 2019, where we were then versus where we are now. I think, it wasn't one of those things where it was an immediate impulse move. You saw several days of accumulation above that, above that breakout, above support, where it slowly was just grinding higher, slowly grinding higher before it just ended up melting faces with a 20% basically a 20% send in less than 2 hours. Like, I don't know if you remember that day. I remember it so clearly. Just watching, just watching, the liquidation cascade of the shorts just continue to pile up, and just like if you were trying to submit an order, the slippage on that candle was so ridiculous that like I don't even know if you could get in, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it,
exactly, exactly. I remember I did watch that happen because a buddy of mine, he and I were arguing who had the better entry, and I think my entries during that bear market bottom were like 4,100, and his were like 4,500, and we were arguing like, oh man, and we were like really upset. And then all of a sudden, it just face melts up to whatever it was, like 7,000, 8,000. All of a sudden, it didn't matter, who got the exact bottom entry. We were all just like standing in awe of it. But yeah, one other thing to point out with that breakout, and I had a whole segment in my last stream over this, but a lot of people get left on the sidelines because they're so used to their momentum indicators, like a daily RSI or a MACD or whatever. They're waiting for that reset. And I went through like tick by tick through that breakout of 2019, where it went north, and showed how if you did that, you would have been left behind. And even if you played it perfectly, like you knew exactly where the RSI would roll over on the daily or whatever. So number one, you had to have a crystal ball. But number two, if you even attempted to do that with a crystal ball, there would be moves where you missed 15 to 20% of the move. And that's assuming you don't get chopped up or whatever. So going back to your point, in my opinion, this is the time to grab along, hold on to it, and not try to get too cute, or if you're sidelined, maybe start your DCA or whatever, because the market has proven time and time again that around this point of the cycle, you're going to get either chopped up or left behind if you play games, if you screw around.
yes, sir. Okay, man, another one I want you to check out up here. Check out the last one that I just pinned. One of my favorite chart comparisons to look at is Bitcoin versus NASDAQ. Dude, to me, it like that has always been such a clear trigger. And again, looking at these triggers and these trends, it's one of those things. Every single time you've had this, super high time frame, bearish resistance that's been broken out of, you've seen a major, a solid rally that's resulted from it. And you can look at it and like I don't think it's up for debate that the structure right now is incredibly similar to every one of those other lines that I ended up drawing with the move that the moves that resulted from those breakouts. So I think it's one of those things. Again, looking at it, it's not just, and I'm bullish on equities. Like if you looked at equities today, they had a solid day. We're breaking a lot of major resistance levels that were pretty key for us, pretty pivotal after the GDP announcement this morning. And Bitcoin's kind of lagged a little bit. It's kind of just sat there a little bit silent. But again, if you look at the overall trend of it, it has broken out versus equity. So if equities are going higher and Bitcoin is going to outpace equities, I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, agreed. And I think one of the number one, I've never seen a chart like this where it's Bitcoin versus Nasdaq. I think that's a really cool thing to look at. So kudos for even coming up with that or looking at that. That's really cool. The other thing I was going to point out too is a lot of people kind of dismiss or overlook or don't talk about enough, I guess, the sell candle that we had on the daily when all the FTX stuff went down. If all you do is if you pull up a chart, and I guess this was like November 8th or 9th or the combination of the two, but if you just pull up where you can see volume and zoom out, there are very few times, like ever, where we've seen sell volume like that. And Bitcoin only fell 5 grand during that time, which was like a 20% drop or 25%. I mean, it's a lot, right? Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong, but the takeaway here is all those sellers are underwater, so to speak, whether they shorted or sold. Every one of them, that candle started at about $20,000, and here we are at 23. So they're already 15% behind if they're trying to buy their way back. So from a market, technical perspective, the fact that the market's with relative ease found its way back above that selling point, where there was like this S-class God tier red candle, that's really bullish to me on the macro, like really bullish.
I'm going to say this, and I want to hear, please come at me if you have to. But gun to my head, if I had to choose right now, yes or no, I don't think Bitcoin ever trades beneath 20K again.
I mean, it could be. It could be. It like what's wild is you remember back during the COVID stuff, how all the markets broke down and things. It was like a 50% drop in a day, and who like BitMEX had to step in and turn their engines off. So, barring some kind of horrific event like that, you may be right. At least not until the subsequent bear market, because God knows between now and then, right? But I think at this point in time, it's like like I was saying earlier, your eyes need to be up, and it's a really good time to be continuing to DCA.
Well, it's kind of like what you were talking about with your friend and your entry points, where you guys were kind of flexing, oh, 41 versus 45. And like, I remember some people at that point in time were still looking there and they were saying, hey, like, well, I guess before the breakout happened, when we like the thing that people don't understand, 4,100 to 4,000, like that was still a pretty decent move at that time after not really having much happen. I'm looking at it. I guess it went all the way up to 42 before it really started to squeeze, and we got that God candle back in 2019. But there were a lot of people that I remember that they had 6+ months under 4K to be able to stack and to be able to consolidate. They had all the way from November of 18 through April of 19, right? So they had that entire period beneath there to be able to stack. But I still remember seeing a lot of posts when it finally broke above 4K where people were saying, hey, I'm going to wait for that dip. I like everything now. I think it's bullish, but I'm going to wait for one last pullback beneath 4K before I go long, right? Like I'm going to look for that entry. And they were left sidelined, the rest of, basically eternity, unless I guess they still had those bids set during the COVID wick, which I think was an anomaly in and of itself. And, the chart kind of showed that with the way that it V'd back up. But they were left on the sidelines forever. And I think that we may have something similar result here with this if we really do get a God candle out of this. And it is a squeeze where it's basically directly to 30K, right? Like everybody that was waiting there for those 20K bids, they're not ever going to get them filled, right? Unless we have another COVID type situation that like somehow on the distribution side, after distribution's done, we retrace, because I don't think we're going to go to all-time highs here. I think we're going 40 to 50K, somewhere in that range, distribute for a few months, break back down, retest, high 20s, low 30s by the end of the year. That's kind of my thought process, or maybe early next year before the halving. But, like, point being, I don't really think that we're ever going to get the opportunity, because I think we are so oversold by this liquidation cascade that we've had, this slow, drawn out liquidation cascade, starting from Luna, the Luna collapse, then with 3AC, Celsius, Voyager, FTX, etc. I mean, I just think that it gave an opportunity for anybody with conviction to be able to, get an entry of a lifetime.
Yeah, 100%. And there's a couple, like I'm not a big like fundamentals guy, but there's a couple fundamentals thing that are worth considering that occurred at the end of the year. I guess before I even say what those are, anybody who's listening, you got to understand markets are like they're basically springs, right? They coil and then they expand. You push into the ground and it pops up like a jack in the box, and that goes both directions, up and down, right? So there's all kinds of, like, you can pin up the energy, and then it'll pop one way or another. At the end of the year, we saw so much sell pressure with very little, as far as by comparison, the volume was substantial, but there was not a lot of new lows. It wasn't substantial new lows. We didn't go to 12K, 10K, which you would think would happen with that amount of sell pressure. So number one, you had all these horrific these news driven events like liquidations and bankruptcies, and not news where it like scared retail, but news events like it was substantial and it was real. It wasn't like some BS thing. All these bankruptcies and such. But the other thing that happened that really people don't talk a lot about is when you compare the start of 22 like, I guess let's back up. If you compare the start of 2020 and all the way to the end of 2022, the percent that like Bitcoin and some of these alts were up by comparison is still so much higher than the traditional markets that some of the biggest guys in the rooms were also selling to offset their losses. They're like, hey, you know what? I know crypto's down 70%, but I'm still up 50% on this particular entry. I'm going to sell, take profit, and to my investors, brag about how, the net across my portfolio, because my traditional market stuff is in the gutter. But hey, look, I offset it with a 50% gain here. It could have been 500%, but whatever, we'll take it. So there was a lot of that kind of stuff going on at the end of the year. And to me, that is the spring being compressed. The guy turning the handle of the Jack in the Box, and here at the start of January of this year, it's the counter to that. It's everything popping out of that.
Well, the leverage was shaken out, right? Like at the end of the day, the leverage was effectively shaken out. So with that process, maybe everything was a little bit overextended on the upside due to the leverage, but I think same thing can be said on the downside, right? Where I think the sell off was also um, a bit overextended as well. So you're looking at that, and I really think that all the conditions are in place to where we really can get one of these solid runs. Um, and I'm under the opinion still that we get it soon. I need to go back. I'm going to find the roadmap that I shared in the summer. And because all this stuff is basically what I've been waiting for so long, which is why I'm so freaking excited. I pinned it up there. I did it back in July, right? So if you look at that roadmap, there's a whole thread, but you can even just zoom in with the fractal. Didn't expect anything crazy. For there, basically, I said most likely path from here is seeing a base range between 16 and 30K established. What eventually resolves around December when price finally breaks above the high time frame diagonal resistance. So I think that it might have had a shot of already breaking out in December if it weren't for FTX. So, FTX happens, price drops a little bit lower. That pushes out the breakout here to January instead of December. But, off by a few weeks from something that was posted 5-6 months ago, like not too bad. And then expecting a few months of rapid, overhyped growth in early 2023, which does not result in a new all-time high. Capping out somewhere, I said in the 50s makes more sense. So I think 40s to 50, 40 to 50, probably more realistic, somewhere in there. But this growth should have an associated, I disagree with this now. I said this growth should have an associated mini alt season. If anything, I think we already saw that with alts right now, everything in this rise up after the breakout. So I think alts basically retrace from here. As far as, relative to Bitcoin strength, Bitcoin is just dominating right now. And then, basically next 18 months or so past that through March of 2024, which is the next halving, defined by a crab market, staying above the high time frame logarithmic support. So basically, that's where I'm getting the, okay, we could potentially, after a few months of distribution, end up sinking back into, the high 20s, low 30s. But, no new all-time highs until late 2024, early 2025, somewhere in there.
I think that's perfectly reasonable. Historically speaking, you need a Bitcoin halving to act as kind of like a market-wide catalyst, and then about a year later, you have your year and a half, you have your all-time high. And that's just kind of been the formula for the last 4 cycles, or however many. There's 3 or 4 cycles. So I think that's perfectly reasonable. One thing I did want to comment on, and this will probably blow your socks off, is if we, how I'm using these pivots, right? And the pivot line itself is another way to think of that is it's like math determining where kind of a fair market value is. So for Bitcoin right now, that the pivot itself is 25K, right? And here, 24K. And here we find ourselves at 23. I think we've hit 23.8. So we're basically at what is kind of quote fair market value. If you look, if you use that same indicator, the pivots, and you look at alts across the board, there's another 50 to 100 to 200% to go, like across the board. So not saying this is going to happen right away, but I think there's a really interesting setup where imagine, let's say Bitcoin finishes its run to 30, 40K, whatever it is, right? And then it just goes sideways and distributes. Well, there's a thing that usually happens where capital flows from like dollars to Bitcoin. Bitcoin hits its target and goes sideways. capital then goes from Bitcoin to alts. Alts, there's a little alt season, and then capital flows out of alts back to dollars, and kind of everything sells off simultaneously. So I think it would be super interesting if we get up to say 33, 35K, and then we have a nasty alt season that kind of blows everybody's socks off. So that's what I'm watching for personally.
I mean, I would love that, man. I just, I'm looking at it. So the closest thing that I can see that was similar to that back in 2019, after Bitcoin kind of had the initial breakout, it had that first flag kind of in the 5 to 5,600 area before it started breaking out again. And you saw some alts start to run again there. But this is after, during that God candle wick, Bitcoin absorbed the liquidity from everything, right? So I think that still happens in line with what you said. And I guess maybe in there, say that we do a slow grind from like, maybe 28 to 33, 30 to 33, somewhere in there. Maybe there's a little mini alt season. But even back in 2019, when you're looking at it from like, it was from the 13th of May through the 10th of June that alts were bullish versus BTC. Then basically alts were not bullish versus BTC until September, which, if you look at the chart, what happened in September of 2019? Bitcoin had topped out, right? So the market had already topped out, and like that was where everything started to tank again in terms of USD value. So alts started to catch up again, but it wasn't until Bitcoin showed extreme weakness. So and if you look at that Bitcoin dominance chart, now there are a lot of people that laugh at the Bitcoin dominance chart, but at the end of the day, why would you laugh at it? It's basically just an aggregate of all the other alt BTC pairs weighted, right? And the majority of that is compromised by ETH. And if you're looking at ETH BTC, I probably need to pin that up as well. ETH BTC is right now at a major high time frame support. I don't think that it survives this God candle if we get it, right? I think that, ends up dumping down with it. So, ETH USD will still climb, right? Like, I'm not saying it won't go up, but it just won't have the same move relative to Bitcoin. So I'm curious, what do you make of the Bitcoin dominance chart? Do you look at any of these alt pairs? Like, what's your take right now on that outside of, kind of I guess those pivots that you were referring to a little bit ago?
So I agree with the majority of everything you just said. I am a huge fan of Bitcoin dominance. I know a lot of people sleep on it. I personally am a big fan of it because it's a way to just very easily see a trend of, is capital flowing into Bitcoin or is it flowing into alts? So you kind of have to know if you're in an uptrend first and foremost before this is kind of like a second step for me. But yeah, like right now, okay, the bias is up after breaking up from the falling wedge, excuse me. The macro bias is now up. Okay, number two, let's look at Bitcoin dominance. Should my capital be in Bitcoin or alts? Well, dominance is trending up. Therefore, the majority of my capital should be in Bitcoin. And like you were saying, I really don't see that changing. When I was talking about earlier about like an alt season, I suspect that will correlate with Bitcoin dominance topping out, wherever that is. It could be exactly where you have it on the chart, a little higher, a little lower, whatever. But I think we'll know when we see it. Usually it's like pretty aggressive rotations. And it's like popcorn popping off. You might not catch the first few kernels, but the first few alts that are firing off, but there may be a few, a handful or another 20 or whatever right behind it. So hopefully you get a little bit of a heads up as things start popping off. So to answer your question, I like Bitcoin dominance and I'm a big fan of it. And I think you're bang on to have your attention on that.
So, I am curious, like during that last cycle, right, there were a couple outperformers. One that I'm thinking off, the top of my head was BNB. It was one of the few coins that actually did outpace while Bitcoin was climbing. The BTC pair for BNB was actually bullish, which, like I said, there just weren't many that were bullish versus BTC back then. Do you see any alts potentially kind of having that BNB type of run throughout this breakout? Do you think there's anything that goes, kind of counter to the rest of the market?
I haven't seen anything that really stands out. Obviously, there's been a handful of them that have just melted faces recently, APT and a few others. But the whole story behind BNB, the size of its market cap, the way it's implemented in an exchange, the likelihood that the exchange itself was rotating its own Bitcoin into BNB as a way to kind of like hedge in a bear market. I mean, I just don't see another coin out there that really checks all those boxes simultaneously. So I don't think that I really don't think that one thing will be able to outperform like BNB did. One quick note about that is, BNB on the Bitcoin pair moonshot. And if you look at the chart, and that is a sure sign of a bear market, right? There's a big breakout, it's going north, and most, at least historically speaking, BNB outperforms Bitcoin during a bear market. Well, you'll notice that there's a particular day where it pico topped, right? It like big crazy wick to the upside. It was like a 30% day or 20% day, whatever it was. That was literally right around the time of the FTX debacle, which is the same time that Bitcoin had the big sell-off candle, the big God tier S-class red candle, right, for sell volume. And so I think it's very interesting that in hindsight, the Bitcoin chart is saying, hey, that's probably the bottom because we probably ran out of sellers, with that intensity. And simultaneously, BNB on the Bitcoin pair topped like literally in the same week. So those were two independent signs or indicators that were saying, hey, we're probably at the bear market bottom. But keep your eyes peeled. We need more confirmation and trends, et cetera, et cetera. But these are two big data points that I was watching for, and they both triggered. Super interesting.
No, it is, man. Okay. So going back on that, I'm curious. What do you think APT does from here in the face of Bitcoin strength?
You know,
Aptos for anybody unfamiliar with that acronym in the crowd.
yeah. So I did some TA on this for the first time actually yesterday. Um, so this is very like a juvenile way of doing things, but I came at it a number of ways. I showed fib extensions. I showed where the prior all-time high was from the launch, like the wick that occurred on several exchanges from the actual launch itself. And that wick was the Pico top of that wick is like $22. There's a number of ways to come up with other targets at around like 19 to 20. So to me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to expect more than, for price to have gotten to between that 19 to $21 range. If it does, it's just beyond, the scope of TA, and it's kind of more of a gamble than analysis. And kind of on that note, what I want to see from a lot of these alts that have had really nice runoffs is eventually later in the year, maybe it's not now, maybe it's in, like sell in May and walk away. Maybe that's when everything cools off or whatever. But whenever it occurs later in this year, I need to see like macro support, macro structure across the board from these alts, like the real ones, the ones that are going to be face melters this next bull run. Because even though it's exciting to see a lot of things go up right now, people tend to forget that V bottoms are the exception. They're not the rule. So, W bottoms, double bottoms, Wyckoff accumulation, like these things are real. These stand the test of time and check the box for face melters in 2025. But until we see that, I just don't have a lot, for like APT or Sol or whatever it is. I can't really put a pin in any of these individually and say, yes, this one's going to run, this one right here. I don't have enough information yet.
No, I respect that. And, I'm kind of in a similar boat where I'm expecting there could be something out there, right? Maybe it's Lido with the strength it's had. I mean, who knows? Maybe somehow APT and that do continue. I personally, I'm under the belief that APT sells off into the Bitcoin strength, and there are a lot of people there that are going to be late longs that are going to be stuck in those positions watching Bitcoin rip. But I think it's the same way with alts across the board, obviously, with what I've just said. So I'm curious right now, going back to Bitcoin, if you're looking, you're sidelined and you're looking for a position, what are you looking for to trigger an entry right now?
Well, I always say give yourself some kind of edge, no matter what it is. It could be big or small, right? So like a big edge might be turn on a moving average on the daily candles. Call it a 20-day moving average, maybe a 50, whatever. It's going to have to be pretty steepish. You're not going to get like a 200-day retest, but maybe you get maybe a 20-day. more than likely you're gonna have to zoom in a little bit and do something like 4 hour candles and a 20 candle EMA, like a 20 EMA on a 4 hour. That's more in line with, say, like how 2019 behaved when it broke out. Kind of the only retest you got was something like that, the 4 hour, 20 EMA. From there, it's just up to you. Maybe you zoom in on the 1 hours and you give yourself a downtrend that price seems to be respecting, and suddenly you see it broke out. Right now we're teasing doing something just like that on the 1 hour charts. There's actually a really nice channel going on the 1 hour if you have log turned on, and we've broken out of a downtrend recently and retested as support. I think you've had a couple of charts that basically showed the same thing. There's all kinds of ways to give yourself a little edge, and that's the only thing I would tell you. Now, the other thing I like to point out is I'm a big fan of having really two stacks of capital. One is your perma hold Bitcoin, you're DCAing with it, you're not really playing any games, you're just trying to get it in, you're just trying to deploy it. And then the other side is the trade stack. But a lot of people will combine both of those stacks as one, and YOLO 50x long, and then lose it all before the bull market's even started. And that's the worst thing you could possibly do. All you're trying to do is get your money in the market and survive from now till December 2025. Like, that's the game. And if you play too many games and lose it all between now and then, you've lost, and you're not going to be here in 10 years.
Oh, I agree, man. And, I mean, my take right now is, I mean, I've shared where I think we are, right? And if you look at like what the percent between the base and the top of this range that we've been in right now on the breakout is, it's like, let me look at this. So need to see. I mean, it's not more than a couple percent, right? Like 4% within this range. Yeah, base of 22.3, highs right now 23.3. So I personally think that it's a buy anywhere in there. Because if you're looking at the upside versus the downside of this, like, I mean, maybe you set your stops down at 22K at or here. But I think the upside is so much higher than the downside that it's just not worth the risk of being sidelined.
Yeah, you nailed it. The worst thing you could see happen is you're bragging to your friends, "Oh, I'm short," or "No, this is a stupid rally. There's no way it continues." And then next thing you know, it's the God candle we're all sitting here waiting on, right? And we're like north of 30 in a blink, and now you're the joke of your friend group because you have no exposure. So, on that note, I would recommend a lot of people stop thinking of this like 100% in, 100% out. We just fell from 70K and here we are looking at 23K. And there's a lot of people that are like, nah, well, I'll wait for it's another 50% lower. And okay, maybe you get it from some black swan thing or whatever, but the market just gave you a 200-day sign and broke out. You better be
Mm-hmm.
listening.
Oh, I agree, man. But I do want to harp on one other thing. As much as I believe that right now you don't want to be sidelined, and that, we're still within this, consolidation range above the breakout, between 22.3 or 22.3 and 23.3. Yeah, we're there, but you shouldn't also, don't overextend yourself on leverage. You don't want to be shaken out of this move either, right? You want to be able to position yourself and be able to survive, you know, the, the 1, 2, 3% wicks. You don't want to have to sit there and sweat it and be like, oh, I've got to close this position while it's still in the range, right? Like, any price action within the range shouldn't make you sweat.
Yeah, exactly. Like, let's just think very simply. If you have one Bitcoin right now, then we return to the all-time high. You've made just about $50,000. Okay, and for a lot of people, that's life-changing money, right? That's $50,000. The only way you screw that up is by turning that one Bitcoin into half a Bitcoin, into a tenth of a Bitcoin, into zero Bitcoin, because you got too cute with leverage. So you got to develop a little bit of discipline and know when, hey, maybe it's time just to be spot long and actually have no leverage right now.
Yeah, because, at the end of the day, a lot of this is just preparation for 2024, 2025. If you've got the cyclical mindset, hey, there's a lot of potential on this run up. And I think there's a lot of money to be made with it. But at the same time, 2024, 2025 is where I think the real fun happens.
Yeah, I think everything points to that. And I think we also see that in the traditional markets too. I think it's all going to be correlated. It's going to be this kind of exuberant risk on scenario. Pick your reason. We're out of a recession, war's over, whatever. It doesn't matter. Headlines aside, like the thing is going to happen because that's what's happened the last four cycles, the last 12 years. I don't. It's very exciting to me. I love finally being able to to be bullish. It's fun.
It feels good, doesn't it, man? I have been cautiously bullish since the base range where I'm like, okay, I think, being short here, how much more downside do you really have left? Like, better to just buy spot, accumulate, sit on your ass, do nothing, don't chop yourself within this range, wait until the impulse move. And that's why I'm so excited again where we are right now, man, because this is, I think we're truly about to, get that major impulse move. I mean, if we haven't already, some people may say that we already have, seen the start of that, but I think we're really going to see the start of that here in a bit whenever it does just chat up to 30K, right? And, during that process, like, again, I play trending markets a lot better than I do ranges. I know there are a lot of traders out there that play ranges incredibly well, but I don't. And that's why I've been sidelined so it's fun to just be back in the game again too.
Yeah, dude, I'm the same way. Even though I like kind of watching all directions, as far as P&L trades and stuff like that, I am a breakout trader through and through. So I need a trending bull market. I need two things: a trending market and a bull market. And it's hard. There's very few times when you actually get those two things together. So my real wins won't come in until probably 2025. But until then, it's just positioning, spot long, and then occasional margin trades here and there. That's how I do it.
Hey, so what's your take on Litecoin right now? Because I know
Yeah.
I want to hear it, man. I want to hear. Because I know you're a big Litecoin guy. Like, do you think that it manifests itself into some crazy meme bullishness with this? Because if it does, that's the signal I'm waiting for at the end of this, right? If we're sitting here and it's May and Bitcoin's kind of been stuck in a range for a while and Litecoin is just freaking exploding higher, sure as heck, like, I am getting out of the market. Like, the wolf of crypto, which a lot of people don't even know that tweet. It's kind of sad. The September 2017 tweet from the wolf of Poloniex, who, when he tweeted, exit all crypto markets, and the market just, like, it was at the Pico bottom. Everything ripped from there. But, I really think Litecoin ripping, like, in a stuck range higher from here for Bitcoin, that's where I would exit all markets.
So Litecoin is really interesting to me because it was one of the first, not only to break out. Everyone kind of like took notice of that here, what, a month ago or so, that it was one of the first to really send it. But prior to that, it went sideways for 200 and almost 250 days. And remember, like, from a technical perspective, and I know you know this, Cleo, but this is just for the benefit of people listening. The longer something's in a particular range, the more likely it is that you can believe what's happening, like the subsequent action. So the price stayed between, call it 75 and $50 for almost a year, for 250 days. And here recently it's broken up. Now, that's interesting to me. The second interesting thing is I'm a big pivot guy on the macro. I love yearly pivots. Litecoin's the only thing that has broken above the pivot, come back and retested it, and then made a new high after that. So it's showing a lot of strength. It's showing a lot of interest from the market. But the third thing, and I think it's worth pointing out, is the Litecoin Bitcoin pair kind of looks like trash. So how do you kind of like compress all those things into one cocktail? To me, that says that Bitcoin's going to outperform, but that the dollar pair is bullish. So there is, new fiat interest in Litecoin. That is something you should take note of. But more than likely, Bitcoin will outperform it in the short to medium term.
Interesting stuff, man. Yeah, I won't lie. Like, I had a moment there in December where I was kind of bullish on Litecoin, but I think I was bullish at the Pico top as far as the Bitcoin pair is concerned. because it double topped there, right? And like it's back down to, you know, I agree with you, man. I think the pair right now kind of just looks a little bit like trash. But I wanted to see if you saw something that I didn't.
No, the only thing that's really, noteworthy is the fact that this downtrend on the Bitcoin pair going back, I guess starting in like 2021 and then concluding in June 2022, that broke up, and there's been like this kind of crazy reaction from there. And to me, when I look at the Bitcoin pair, that looks like something where I've kind of missed the move, and like we were talking about on the Bitcoin trade, now I need to find an edge somewhere, and I haven't found it. Maybe it's out there. Maybe somebody smarter than me has found it. But as far as like breaking a downtrend or going sideways and then finally breaking out, like I need something like that to really give me confidence to move some of my Bitcoin trade stack over into Litecoin. But for now, I don't see it. I just don't see it.
Well, hey, one thing that I realized I don't think that we've touched on, but I'm looking through the audience. We've got a lot of, you know, people out there with JPEGs for PFPs. So, would you mind walking through why you think it's important to look at the Bitcoin pair, why that's still relevant for a bunch of these altcoins?
Yeah. So let's take it back to the days before like the JPEG traders, right? So before NFTs, there have always been altcoins. No matter where we are in the cycle, there's always been an altcoin. Altcoin just being kind of a catch-all term for not Bitcoin, anything other than Bitcoin. And going back to the first cycle, there's all kinds of stuff, Namecoin and whatever. There's Masternodes, there's
Feathercoin.
Feather, yeah, Dentacoin, dentists on the blockchain, and people are like, oh yes, that 100x long, let's go. So there's always been these promises of the next Bitcoin or better than Bitcoin or whatever, and they've all sold off versus Bitcoin. Basically, like if you charted whatever the thing is versus Bitcoin, it's just down and to the right forever, like for 10 years. It does there's occasional relief rallies and dead cat bounces, blah blah blah. But on the whole, it's just the whole history of crypto is littered with these projects that are just 99% down versus Bitcoin. And you've got to consider that when you're looking at this. So how I make my, like the correlation between those things and NFTs is treat it just like you treat any other altcoin. If you want to be have long term exposure to say Litecoin or your NFT, it should really kind of be considered the same way. Like the odds are good that this will underperform Bitcoin long term, 10, 20, 30 years. Okay, I've made my peace with that. But I want to have fun and trade my NFTs, and I think it's trending up right now. So I just need to kind of like, there's a dichotomy there. You can ride a bull trend and still understand the long term, implications of it. So I guess the punchline is, take profit aggressively. If you're 100x up on your entry, maybe take a little profit on that. And the other thing is never be trading, whether it's an altcoin or NFTs. Don't trade with money you need. I literally, in my stream last night, I've never had this happen. I had 3 individual people come in separately and ask, how can I make $100 a day trading, either NFTs or alts? And I was flabbergasted. This is not the time to be even considering stuff like that. Like you shouldn't,
Bro, what
don't
about the
put,
TikTok videos though?
yeah, well, I'm sure it gets likes and hits and, the algorithms
I mean,
love
there
it,
are
but
TikTok videos out
man,
there that say it's just as easy as, 1% a day for however many days to become a millionaire.
yeah, we had somebody, I was in a space, somebody
Just got to
said,
be perfect.
you just got to be perfect. Somebody said, well, my last 10 trades averaged 50% each. And somebody like was real quiet and then responded, wait, so if that continues for another 10 days, you'll be a billionaire? It's like, come on, man. Like, be, be real. That's not how it is.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate you saying it, like your context for it. So what I was kind of getting at, even not necessarily even touching on the NFT side of it, but just touching for the NFT people why looking at the altcoin pairs versus BTC is important. Even back in the day, right? Like we didn't trade any alts versus USD. That just didn't happen until 2020. It was, except for ETH, like ETH, Litecoin, basically whatever was on Coinbase, which Coinbase only had Bitcoin, ETH, and Litecoin at the time, right? So no alts were traded versus USD. They were all traded versus BTC. BTC is the king of this market, right? As Bitcoin goes, the rest of the market goes with it. So when you're looking at the king, basically the rudder of the ship, you want to see, okay, can I outpace this or can I not? What direction is it turning? And, is what I'm in, like, is it going to go against the current, with the current? Like, what exactly can I do to optimize my trade here?
Yeah, and I'll give you a great example of that. Doge in the last bear market. If you had watched the Bitcoin pair of Doge, it's like a heartbeat, sensor you'd see at a hospital. It just kind of goes up and down and up and down, but it's like effectively to the right, 90 degrees to the right. So there became this pattern where you're like, oh well, if it gets to this level, you can make an entry, and then it
Sub
usually
20
explodes.
sats, baby.
Yeah, sub 20 sats, sell above 100, rinse and repeat. You make a fortune doing that. Well, that actually was a move that I was lucky enough to catch. So I bought sub 20 sats, and then it exploded. Now I didn't catch the Pico top because I had no idea it would go as high as it did. I think I got maybe, let's call it 40% of the move, and that's probably being generous, maybe 30%. But that's still a way to use the Bitcoin pair chart. See an entry opportunity, put a little at risk, take profit, and move on. It doesn't mean I think Doge is going to be the next Bitcoin or anything like that.
Yeah, you're right. Like the Doge trade was a great one until it wasn't, because I did the exact same thing, man. Like I rode Doge up all the way to I think 120 sats, and I completely dumped the bag at that point. And I think at 120 sats, it was still less than 2 pennies, and I completely fumbled my Doge bag before it just kept ripping up to a dime. So that would hurt. So yeah, there are times
Same.
where some of these trends and some of these rules, the rules are broken, and it can happen. Things can go against it, but referring to what you're talking about, like it still led to a good trade. It still led to a solid multiple from it. And hey, speaking of that, it's one of those things where, hey, that was a meme bag that ended up rallying. It did really well. It spoke to the Elon meme culture side of things. And there are some bags, I know you said the majority are always down to the right, but there are some bags, you can look at ETH, you can look at Doge, you can even look at some of the ones from this last cycle that are not always down and to the right, right? Like there are some exceptions to that rule.
That's fair. I recognize that I'm speaking with the tone of a Bitcoin maxi because I kind of am. Yes, you're right. There are some out there. I have just kind of swallowed this pill. I've reached this acceptance where I'm like, okay, I am not smart enough to pick what will outperform Bitcoin, like in the long run. In the long run, I'm just not. So from accepting that, now let's see how we can make a little bit of money in the short term, and my long term bag will forever be Bitcoin. That's just my personal perspective.
No, I feel that, man. I mean, and again, that was the mindset of everybody on crypto Twitter back in the day. I'm telling you, that's why people laughed at you whenever you said, "Oh, I'm going to try to," whenever you charted something back to USD, people laughed at you because everybody's goal with trading alts was to stack more Bitcoin back in the day, right? Like you don't see that mantra quite as much anymore. I think people are just profit maxis, and there's some people with these different niche communities that have sprung up that, like, I mean, Bitcoin is a foreign language to them, but like that was always the rule of thumb, realistically until the past couple of years.
Yeah, I've actually seen more and more. So part of what my live streams are is I'll TA anything people just throw at me because it's fun for me. I like looking at a completely blank chart and trying to figure out what's going on, and then checking it back a week later or whatever and seeing how it worked out. So I've noticed more and more that as people they throw me these things I've never heard, QRL and whatever. So I'm like, okay, and I'll pull it up, and there'll only be a USD option, or a euro
Mm-hmm.
option or something. There's no Bitcoin pairs, and I've noticed that more and more. It's actually really frustrating for somebody like me.
Well, it's tough though too, because I mean, if you're thinking about it from that, like a lot of the shit coins that people will have you trade, especially the smaller market caps, they'll be traded on dexes, so they'll have an ETH pair, I guess a WETH pair that you can go back and track. But yeah, none of those are gonna like at a certain point. A lot of these coins that are out here aren't traded on the major centralized exchanges, so you don't really have the option of being able to go back and trade to USD, I guess, unless you or BTC, I should say, unless you back calculate.
Yeah, that reminds me of a bit of alpha for the group here. If you see a certain coin, like an altcoin, you got your eye on it, it's up 10%, it's up 100%. You're like, man, should I buy it? It's up 500%. And then it finally shows up on Coinbase where you happen to have some money. Pro tip, don't buy it. This that's where coins go to top out. Like you're the extra
Somebody else
liquidity.
knew about it before you. Right?
100%. And it's probably Coinbase themselves building a bag, I'm convinced at this point.
Yeah, somebody front ran you. There's no alpha left in that. Like you're right. Coins go to coin, which it's funny because there was a period of time where, dude, you remember that was the most bullish narrative for any coin. Everybody would be like, "There's a rumor that whatever is going to be listed on Coinbase," and everybody's ears would perk up, and that would be the signal that, oh shit, like we might want to consider gig alonging this here because hey, that Coinbase money might be flooding into it. But then you started to get Coinbase, listing like, freaking box top coins and whatever the heck was out there. I forget. There were just some ridiculous ones that they put out there that didn't make sense. Like literally,
Yeah.
they list just about anything now, and every single one, you know, they had a cycle where and Kobe called them out on it, where he caught obvious insider trading, and those guys definitely bit the bullet because they got caught and they're serving time for it. But that doesn't mean that there's not somebody else involved with the coin or somewhere else in the deal with a lot of these things that news gets out on this shit. If it's getting listed on Coinbase, it's dead.
Yeah, between that kind of stuff and all the McAfee bots, if you remember that from what was it like a
Yeah,
cycle ago, like I just gave up on any kind of news front running. Like you just by the time you even see it hit the headlines, the bots have already pumped it 100%, and by the time you click buy, you're just cashing them out. That's how I saw it.
dude, I had one of my best trades back in that last alt cycle. I had a couple Bitcoin that I put into Humanic in January of 18. Literally about 30 minutes before McAfee tweeted. So it probably looked like I front ran that. Because back then a lot of these, again, you were trading spot, you weren't trading and like on a smaller market cap. I mean, 2 BTC was a decent chunk in the wall for it. And then, half an hour later, it just starts ripping. And I'm like, what the hell is happening right now? And I go and I look and I have a notification that McAfee tweeted. Freaking nailed that, man. Like, and, I ended up flipping that into a QTUM bag that did decent, but then got shaken out because I got greedy and wanted to go somewhere else with it. But like, I one time and one time only beat out the McAfee bots and the McAfee tweet.
Totally by accident, huh? Totally
Totally.
no.
Yeah, I had this backdoor connection with Janice.
Yeah, right.
So
You mentioned the Coinbase stuff. I remember they put out this tweet. They're very proud. Like you could see they were puffing their chest out. They're like, we're announcing the arrival of these 5 new coins. And it's like you said, it was like everyone looked around like, what? What are these? And I remember I quote tweeted them and I was like, bro, what are we even doing right now? Like, what? There's so many, there's like 30 or 40 things above these on the market cap, on coin market cap. And this is what you want to put on. And next thing I know, the CFO of Coinbase followed me, and I tried to like engage and talk to him and DM him and stuff, and they would never respond. But it was almost like, "Hey, we're watching you, guy." So I don't know.
yeah, man. I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a couple other old, like the other one. The conferences used to be a big deal because we had that one time, literally one time in May of 2017, that everything went off whenever consensus happened, right? It was like late May of 2017. You had the consensus weekend pump of all these altcoins. So then the next year in 2018, when it was the middle of the bear market, everybody's bags were down so bad. Everybody was just like, man, consensus is around the corner, bro. Like, keep your chin up. These bags are going to turn around. We've got the consensus pump coming. And then consensus got there. And I just remember everything dumping off even worse. And I think that's been a rule of thumb basically ever since then.
Yeah, nobody even wants to take a risk on it anymore. You know what? You remember when Bitcoin broke down from 6K? It bounced on 6K for a straight year, and then it finally broke down. I I was at a conference, and I remember going around. It was the one in New York. It may have been Consensus. I don't remember what it was, but anyway, they Grayscale had these sheets out on their little their meet and greet table, and I guess by law they had to print their gains for the year, and so it was at the end of 2018, and they have all these printed laminated things sitting out, and it was like Bitcoin option minus 80%. It was like the Litecoin option minus 90%. And it was like, this can't be real. I picked one up and I don't think I have it anymore, but if I find it, I'll tweet it out because it was hilarious.
Oh, you've got to, man. I mean, so okay, yeah, there was the consensus, which again, with that, like, can you think of any conference that's happened recently that's been a bullish conference for the market? Any overhyped anything? Like, I can't.
No, no shot, nothing.
Like,
Uh,
Bitcoin conferences have been a staple as far as sell-offs. I swear, every conference that I've gone to recently has been some type of local top.
yeah, and it's usually when Sailor's saying he's making a new entry, and then everyone's like, "Oh crap!" and they go close their longs because he's got like the worst track record for that.
Yeah, that's going to be my rule of thumb. Next conference I go to, I'm just going to enter a short and whatever, like whatever's out there. I'm like, just short it going into it and sit back, wait, be happy, pay for your trip. Because inevitably, whatever that shit is, it's going to go down.
Well, so you bring up a good point though, and it's like I wonder if because the momentum of the market is changing, right? Like we saw that falling wedge, we're breaking out, we're like 10 days into the breakout. I wonder if the market tries to sell off on something like that and it fails. And for like the first time we see okay, we all kind of know what's going to happen. The thing happens and then market money number goes down and everyone's kind of in agreement, and then the thing happens but number doesn't go down. That would be kind of a cool, just another way of saying, oh, okay, this market's actually turning around, things are actually getting better.
it would be, but what's the next big event? Like as far like the Bitcoin conference is in what, April again? Um,
There's a number.
and
Somebody said there's like 30 different crypto events this year, so I don't
Yeah,
but I don't know
I
of
believe it. I
one
mean, heck, there are
over the
probably
other.
more than 30, but as far as like the major namesakes, like, the Bitcoin conference is a big one. And I'm looking at that. Bro, honestly, like if it's in April, April's probably around the timeline I'm looking for everything to be topped out anyway.
Yeah, like I was saying before, there's the old, sell in May and walk away. And I think it was what in 2018 didn't it rally into like May or June. I mean, so yeah, that's probably a really good time to take profit. And if we're anywhere near these key levels you and I are looking at, I think we'll all kind of be in agreement that that's probably all she wrote, at least for a few months.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Yeah, so again, there are a lot of things like that to look forward to. But I want to pivot a little bit real quick. So we're talking about we're bullish on Bitcoin, a little bit skeptical of alts. Um, personally, I know this may sound insane and it may sound contradictory. I'm actually bullish still on altcoins with pictures. I think, especially if you're looking at it from the charting perspective, there are a lot of decent setups. I'm curious, what will it take for you to be red pilled into trading NFTs?
Oh man, you know what? I've asked myself this, and it's actually really sad because I'll look at a setup and be like, "Huh, I could 10x on that." If it plays out like it might, and then there's a part of my brain that's like, "Meh, all right, well, what's over here?" And I don't know what it'll take to change that outlook, to like become interested. And what's funny is I'll ask people in my chat what they think, and apparently a lot of people feel the same way. They just don't click with it for one reason or another. And it's not like a hatred. It's just like pure like It's like watching Doge pump. Like that's cool, and I'm glad people made money on it, but I'm not going to go chase it. You know what I mean?
Okay, fair enough. So, like, I don't know. The way that I look at it is kind of like what you said. with watching Doge pump, like it's pretty easy to recognize, I think, the power of memes and the power of community also, because you looked at it, Doge was a really community driven rally, like around Elon at the center. So I think there are a lot of parallels as far as what can make something successful. But what I think is also incredibly interesting about it, you've got parallels to the crypto market, obviously, but you also have parallels to the collecting market. And if you look at collectibles and what they've done, the right collectibles are up and to the right. It's true. Like if you have a good artist, for physical art, you're like, those good artists, like their works, unless they do something to really, taint their name or, ruin their collection, the majority of those work pieces go up into the right. And, like the trading cards and other things like that. So that's why I think you get a little bit of a difference as far as the way to kind of approach and analyze the market. And I still think that you can use TA to do it, but that's why I think that, you can have alts like, the regular alts go down and alts with pictures still do something else, because I still think it's early enough that, you know, some of these solid projects, when you're looking at it from the collector perspective, like there are only so many people involved in crypto right now and only so many pieces in each one of these collections. So like, I'm not necessarily here saying that I think there's going to be this massive NFT run like we saw the last cycle where every single thing pops off. But I do think that there's going to be a flight to quality where a lot of these quality projects could potentially keep running even while Bitcoin runs.
Well, did you hear Nick Bax, when we were on that that space yesterday with him, and he was telling us about all the hackers and stuff. And he goes, "Oh yeah, you and I met on Bitcoin Talk, but you don't like it. Like you like collectibles, but you don't like NFTs." He was just like flabbergasted. And yeah, and I'll eat crow right here in front of everybody. If I had the chance to make a bet back in 2020 that NFTs would not be here come 2023, I'd have mortgaged my house and bet it all and been like, this is just a blip in the pan, a little fad, whatever, but there's still $1 million NFTs out there. And that shows I don't know what I'm talking about half the time.
So again, the way I'm looking at it, man, I just think that that part of the cycle, we're going to have fun in certain parts of it, right? Like I said, I think flight to quality this year, but I'm looking at it like alts in 2017, 2018, right? If you were a Bitcoiner in 2017, 2018, you saw a lot of alts have this incredible run up and a lot of expansion. And then, like obviously a lot died off during the next bear market. But if you use that as justification that, okay, a lot of these alts have died off, that means nothing's ever going to come back, then you were completely sidelined for some massive plays, whether it's DeFi, L1s, whatever else, this last bull market, right? They came back and they pulled off multiples at higher market caps that nobody expected they could. And they made the 2017-18 run look like a blip on the radar. So I really, I'm looking at it from the same perspective as far as the evolution of the technology in this space, potential to go viral, et cetera, right? Like digital collectibles are a lot easier to understand than some type of digital coin, for people as far as, oh, what am I going to do with the coin? People struggle to comprehend that. But a digital collectible, I think it's a little bit easier to, and I think it's one of those things too that maybe when you experience it, you start to understand why, but it's a little bit easier to resonate with. So, like, those are kind of the things that I'm looking at as far as what the catalyst will be. But I think that NFTs this next cycle are going to be like what, we saw the growth in altcoins were this last cycle.
Yeah, I think for me, I've just realized that when there's a new sector or a new genre, like DeFi or NFTs, and I know that's like a very broad brush, but for me, I realize about myself that I have a hard time being able to predict, where those things might go. And so I really slept on DeFi. I really slept on NFTs. But that doesn't mean I know they're going to go to zero. It just means I have no like I don't have anything to really put my hands around, and so I would rather stay away. Like I'm kind of more risk adverse, I guess, in that way. If I don't really understand it or think I have my arms around it, I'd rather stay away from it. That's just me though.
So would you consider trading them, I guess, like when a perps market emerges? Because I'm positive there's enough money there that can be made from it that if somebody can figure out how to do it efficiently, that somebody is going to figure out how to do it efficiently. So I'm curious, at that point, will you do it? Basically, kind of ignore the spot side of it and stick to trading perps. Would you be interested at that point, or would you still say, not really worth it to dip my toes into this market because not as familiar with kind of what makes it tick?
No, I would. I That would make me interested. So if any exchanges are out there listening, I would definitely touch that, because part of my reservation is number one, trusting the chain that whatever these things are on, whether it's like Solana or Ethereum or whatever, like just trusting the long term viability of the chain, and then no, like number two, the custody side of it, and knowing that I'm not going to lose it all. I'm blanking on his name that just lost it from kind of a poison smart contract or a
Yeah,
I don't
Kevin
even know.
Rose just lost like a
Yeah,
couple
right.
billion
Like
dollars
that would
worth.
be
He didn't
me.
lose everything, but he lost like a good amount.
Yeah, odds are good that that would be me because I'd screw something up. But if I am able to, within the walled garden of my exchange, kind of bet on a direction, yeah, all day. That sounds interesting.
Okay. And I'm asking you that because it's one of the things I love hearing it from your perspective where you're not really red pilled on it, right? You're a little bit more skeptical because that's part of my thesis also is that I think that the overall interest in the marketplace right now, there's this realistically, crypto Twitter is just not that interested as a whole in NFTs right now. And I think that's kind of my catalyst for what really bridges the gap.
Yeah, I think you may be right, and I think you're going to see that sentiment change as like quote new money comes in. As the next cycle comes in, I'm sure you're going to get all kinds of interest across the board for all sorts of stuff, whether it's alts or NFTs or whatever the latest thing is, DeFi, and things we don't even know about, right? So. I would like to have my toes dipped in some way, but I want to preserve the capital that I've built at the same time.
100%, man. Well, let me kick it over to brainfart.eth. I just love saying that. Brainfart.eth, what do you have, man?
Yeah, hey, thank you, buddy. It's always good, as always, like coming up to your spaces and speak. It was like nice to hear you guys talk about like the 2017 part of time where like altcoins were traded against Bitcoin. And I do remember myself back in the day, our goal was always to like whenever you're trading an altcoin, you are trading it to get more Bitcoin. Like that was the play, that was the thing that was happening, right? But now slowly we've seen that shift, like even in between it shifted from Bitcoin to Ethereum, where there were charts coming out that were being paired with Ethereum, and you could basically like trade with with Ethereum as well. So like pretty interesting take. I just wanted to know, man, you have like so much knowledge. Do you have a course or something where I can learn like some technical stuff that you have knowledge to, or like are you planning on having a course out or something like that where you like where like I can eventually have like some sort of knowledge like you do? Just wanted to ask that.
Jack, I think he's talking to you.
I was going to say, I think he's talking to you. Fart. Uh, Fart.eth. Who are you talking to, bud?
Both of you guys, because like you've been in the industry for like so long, and you guys have been like like putting out content and everything like that. So I wanted to know like if either one of you like is plan like if you guys do have a course or something like that, or if you're like planning. I don't know about your name is like Crypto Jack. Yeah, I don't know if you have a course or like Kaleo, but that is something that I want to know, like a place where I can get like solid information from people who've been in the space for like a long time would help definitely.
You respond first, Kaleo.
Well, I'll respond by saying there are better courses than anything that I could put out that are out there. One simple place to start, go check out like Crypto Cred's pin tweet. I think it's his pin tweet still. But he's put out a lot of solid resources. I think he's done really good work with that. So I point a lot of people toward that. And then if you finish that, then I think that while you're reading through that, you'll see plenty of different topics that might pique your interest. And honestly, man, Google is your best friend from there. So you can kind of start with the outline with that and go forward. But there are a lot of resources out there if you just spend the time looking through it. Jack, what do you have?
Yeah, I like when I entered the space, my whole goal was to keep everything free. So all my content's free. And whether it's a live stream or YouTube or whatever. Now maybe one day I build kind of like a YouTube library. I think that'd be fun. Like this is a falling wedge, and then kind of like talk about it, whatever. But for now, no, I don't have any kind of like paid group thing. In fact, one of my favorite things to say is like you should like people should be comparing me and other like folks like Cred against the performance of the paid group you're considering, because a lot of times you'll get the same or better knowledge from people out in the mix like Kaleo or Cred or whoever than you will from the paid group itself.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I will say that I agree with that 100. Like, never end. I would never recommend anybody entering a paid group unless they have some like base understanding of some of the content themselves going into it, because you want to be able to be critical of some of the material that's being put out there, right? You want somebody to be able to help sharpen you. But I think teaching you from the ground up with a paid group, like, not always the best thing. Like I said, there are just a lot of solid places you can start for free first. And if you're really getting into it and looking to take it to the next level, I mean, there are some solid paid groups out there. Like, I'm not going to shill any, but like I know some people that have them that like there can be some solid content found from that. But it's usually a rule of thumb in this space to kind of be weary of them. There have just been enough bad actors over time that have kind of bought false credibility, to hype themselves up, and really don't know what they're talking about more than the next guy.
but then like there is like one thing, like I've started learning like the basics of TA and everything like that, right? And then I've seen like many people say that, oh, crypto market is like still new, so the fibs and like the psychological levels or something like that, like they don't actually work with crypto because like it is highly manipulated, not like like forex pairs or like Nasdaq and stuff like that. So is that true, or like you can apply your knowledge on like whatever you're studying there, you can apply it on crypto as well?
I mean, I'll hop in here real quick, Kaleo, just to say I started in crypto in 2017 on the technical side, right, like charts and stuff, and then went to the traditional markets. And I have not had any issues with respect to like macro technical analysis. In fact, we started finding confluence between the S&P and Bitcoin like at the start of 2022 just by charting the two, and like lo and behold, oh hey, the S&P and the Dow Jones are in distribution. Wow, I didn't even think that would be something we'd see, but we see it. So I think that they do apply across the board. And you got to remember that crypto trades 24/7. So there's a lot more like infinitely more data points, down to the second tick, 24/7 rather than just like over an 8-hour period, like a traditional market.
Yeah, man, I think that's fair, right? Like, that's one of the things that I've kind of learned with NFTs too, is that it doesn't matter what name you put next to a market, whatever the market is, the psychology behind looking a lot of the technicals transcends whatever the identity of that market is, right? There's a lot of opportunity. I think, especially in markets where people don't use technicals, like that's one of the reasons why I really like NFTs, Jack, is just because I don't think there are a lot of people using that. I guess I take that back because there are a lot more. It's become more saturated since I've started talking about it. Um, but there really aren't too many people still, like, especially funds and that type of stuff that you're trading against, at least on a technical level, when it comes to these NFTs. And you're not going to get liquidated in the process holding them while you're waiting for whatever move to happen. So like, that's one of the reasons why I really like them as an opportunity, to again, if I were going to look for something right now that's not Bitcoin to long, it would be a solid project within the NFT space as your kind of built-in leverage, your built-in bet, for something that's speculative, hedging basically against Bitcoin would be, like that would be where I would look right now. And I know it's not traditional, but again, I think that's why, like, you're not competing with a bunch of these VCs that have these massive bags. It's a lot easier to do the full due diligence of who holds what and, study the wallets, go through everything. It's all transparent, if you just put in the time to do it. Nothing else, you can spend time pretty easy on the fundamental side. And honestly, the fundamental side works too, right? So when you get a combination of strong fundamentals, strong technicals, like that's what I look for in entering a trade. So yeah, like that's kind of where I lie on it. But at the same time, I mean, it's completely up to you. There are a lot of people that will still say, there are people that will say different markets operate completely differently and you can't use technicals at all. I just disagree.
Thank you for your answer and your time. Just like one last thing, I just wanted to know how long have you been trading, like per se, Jack and Kaleo? Like basically, how long it took you guys to get to this place where you are right now?
2017 for myself.
I actually started in CS:GO, the game, and I was a trader in that. Like I would trade skins and stuff, and I had this really expensive skin, and somebody wanted to buy it from me in Bitcoin. That was the rub. It was like 50 grand, or no, it was like 35 grand at the time, but it had to be in Bitcoin, and it scared the hell out of me. And I like had meetings with my friends, and I was like, I don't know, I think this is that like this is what drug dealers use, and like the whole thing. Like I was scared to death. And from there, it just was kind of a learning curve. Once he made that trade to me, he sent me the Bitcoin. I sent him the item. I had it was like 65 Bitcoin at the time, and I think the price was like $500 per Bitcoin, and I sold every single one of them. So I come from a place where like I've made many mistakes, and I'm kind of out there to make up for my mistakes and try to like trade my way back to where I've lost it all. But like over a long period of time.
All right.
RIP to those
Thank you.
70 Bitcoin. I think we've all been there, one shape or
Yeah.
another. Like that's one thing that's like over time, even right now, I feel like with the emergence of everything, so many people fade Bitcoin. Bitcoin will eventually humble everybody. Like it just with enough time does go up into the right.
I'll tell you something funny real quick because you're right. Everybody, the longer you're in this space, the more you realize everyone's got a story like that. I was talking to Charlie Lee, and he was telling me how he had this stack of 100,000 Litecoin, like 100,000 individual Litecoin that he had mined. He had mined them all, and this was before any kind of pump or anything. And he watched price go all the way to $10, and he thought, nah, there's no way it gets any higher. And then it fell back to $1. And he's like, crap, I missed my opportunity. I could add $1 million. So he's like kicking himself. And next thing you know, it goes back to $5 or $6. And he's like, I market sold all of them at $5 or $6. And, we know from the charts and stuff, I mean, some exchanges went all the way to $400 shortly after. But just to point it out that like even the guys who found these coins really don't have a clue where things are going to go. Because sometimes we all, as being the quote retail, we like to think, oh, there's someone out there with like shadowy super knowledge and they know exactly what's going to happen. But, many times people are just kind of doing their best to guess at it.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So I don't know, man. Like it's fun. I think that we're going to have a lot more fun though coming up here. And Wiz, I'm sorry that I'm not going to give you the chance here to speak because I am going to go ahead and wrap up the space for now. I'm going to do a space here in a couple hours. Um, but like I do think that a God candle's on its way one way or another. Just make sure whatever position you have that you don't get shaken out in the range that we're in. Be a little patient for it. We'll have that space whenever it happens. But hopefully, I really appreciate Jack, some of the knowledge that he dropped today, really beneficial. I know for myself, everybody in the room appreciates it. I want to give one last shout out to my partner for today's space as well, So Rare NBA. I pinned it up at the top. It's scroll through there, and it is the intersection of digital collectibles and fantasy sports. So if you've never tried it out before, you can sign up with that link, try it out for free with the common game, and also try out some of the games where the collectibles do have a value. You can save those for future years, etc., with the limited rare and unique collections. So make sure to check them out. Appreciate them again, and again, just appreciate everybody up here. And yeah, it's been fun. So until next time, aka a couple hours from now, I will see y'all later.
Later.